Deafness and Deafblindness, Society and History, Exhibition Panel 1. We are all unique, we are all different, but the way these differences have been perceived and responded to varies throughout history. Up to the 16th century, bodily impairment was commonplace and seen as the norm in everyday life. The challenges of unsanitary conditions, a limited knowledge and understanding of the human body, war, pestilence, and a poor or limited diet meant that differences were many and varied. However, this did not mean that negative attitudes towards difference did not exist, and evidence from ancient Greece and Rome shows us that it did. There had to be a reason why difference existed, and the answer was found to be religious in its nature. During the 1500s to the 1700s, ideologies began to focus on ability, applying this to a range of approaches, using new concepts in science, medicine, education, civic engagement, theology, and social performance. There was also the growth of hospital-based medicine. Women were specifically targeted in relation to difference, with an emphasis on a moral responsibility to bear perfect children, with defects at birth being viewed as an outcome of a woman's deviance in terms of her moral bearing or the way she managed her pregnancy. The growth of male professionals working institutions fed into these arguments, with physicians and theologians moralising about impairment whilst increasingly emphasising the vulnerability of good health. Social policy changed in Britain in the 16th century, and this has dictated the way that disability has been viewed by society, even to this day. The Tudor Poor Law came into force, the first attempt to decide who should deal with the poor, and the beginnings of decision-making about the deserving and undeserving poor. Faced with poor wages and joblessness and extra costs of impairment, disabled people cobbled together a makeshift domestic economy of support from family and community, as well as from mutual aid, charitable assistance and state relief. After the new Poor Law had dismantled the customary right to assistance, self-help was a driving force behind all these sources of income. Population growth quickly followed. Then began the move from rural to urban areas, with a lessening of family ties, not to mention the Industrial Revolution, the shift to urban living, and the move towards capitalism as an economic model. A separation between the roles of home and work had begun, which up until this point were more often than not rolled into one, as remains the case for the farming community today, for example. From the 1700s, the rise of capitalism led to a move to get the most out of every worker and to ensure that as many people were in work and were able to produce a high output. The examinations used to discover how many people could be drawn upon to work led to the categories of non-participation that we know today. Those who were too young or too old to be able to work effectively were classed as deserving poor. Disability was not included. Medical professionals continued to advance their knowledge and look for ways to cure people, and in doing so, their status climbed, and those they were attempting to cure diminished. Salisbury Journal, 17th of April, 1738, page 151. By Mr. Duckett of Fairford in Gloucestershire, an approved operator for the hearing and licensed surgeon for 44 years, who, by the blessing of God, have found medicines that cure all sorts of deafness or noise in the head or ears, if curable, though of 20 or 30 years continuance, as will be testified by hundreds of people who have been cured, thereby several of whom have been deaf from their cradles. Social historians note that it is not easy to study the history of disability.